Gustave Caillebotte, born on August 19, 1848, in Paris, France, was a multifaceted figure: painter, art patron, engineer, and yachtsman, whose contributions to the development of modern art are as profound as they are often understated. Though his works are now widely celebrated, particularly for their realism and unique perspectives, Caillebotte's reputation during his lifetime was more associated with his support of other artists than with his own creative output. As an artist working on the margins of Impressionism, Caillebotte blended realism with the experimental spirit of the avant-garde, forging a path that reflected both deep intellectual engagement and personal restraint. Caillebotte was born into an affluent upper bourgeois family in Paris. His father, Martial Caillebotte, had made a fortune in the textile business and later invested in real estate, providing the family with a stable and prosperous life. Gustave grew up in a world of privilege, a fact that allowed him the freedom to explore artistic and intellectual interests without the burden of financial necessity. The Caillebotte family owned a large home in the city, as well as a country estate in Yez, a suburb southeast of Paris, where Gustave spent many of his formative summers. His education was conventional for a young man of his class. He attended the prestigious Lycée Louis le Grand and later earned a degree in law in 1870. However, the outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War that same year interrupted his path toward a legal career. Caillebotte served in the Garde Nationale Mobile during the conflict, and the harrowing experiences of war left an imprint on his worldview, if not overtly on his art. Following his military service, he returned to civilian life with an intensified interest in painting. In 1872, he began formal training at the École des Beaux-Arts, though he reportedly found the academic style uninspiring. He also studied privately under the painter Léon Bonnat, whose realist style may have had a more lasting impact on Caillebotte's artistic inclinations. Despite this exposure to conventional academic instruction, Caillebotte would soon become affiliated with a group of artists whose approach to painting was radically different from the official salon tradition. In the early 1870s, Caillebotte became acquainted with several artists who were already challenging the rigid norms of the Académie des Beaux-Arts. Among them were Edgar Degas, Claude Monet, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and Camille Pissarro. Though Caillebotte's own style was not strictly Impressionist, favouring clear outlines and meticulous realism over loose brushwork, his sympathies lay with their rejection of the conservative art establishment. His first major involvement with the group came in 1876, when he participated in the second Impressionist exhibition. This was a decisive moment for Caillebotte, marking both his public emergence as an artist and his financial and organizational support of the Impressionist movement. He helped to fund the exhibition and provided critical infrastructure, such as renting venues and securing publicity. Over the next several years, he would continue to exhibit alongside the group and use his personal fortune to support artists struggling to sell their work. Caillebotte's career as a painter began in earnest in the mid-1870s. His early works were characterized by an acute attention to detail, spatial precision, and a concern with modern urban life, a subject largely ignored by the art establishment of the time. Yet his involvement in the arts extended far beyond the canvas. Perhaps his most enduring legacy lies in his role as a patron and collector. He purchased works from many of his contemporaries at a time when their art was neither fashionable nor profitable. By the end of his life, Caillebotte had amassed a significant collection of Impressionist and post-Impressionist works, including paintings by Monet, Renoir, Degas, Sisley, Pissarro, and Cézanne. His collection not only served to sustain many of these artists during difficult financial periods, but also preserved crucial works that might otherwise have disappeared into obscurity. Moreover, Caillebotte was instrumental in organizing and financing subsequent Impressionist exhibitions. He offered practical assistance, such as catalogue production and transport of artworks, and mediated disputes within the often fractious group. His contributions helped maintain the cohesion and public visibility of the Impressionist movement during its most formative years. Caillebotte's life, while seemingly comfortable, was not without complexity. He never married and lived much of his adult life with his younger brother Martial. Their relationship was close and mutually supportive, especially after the early deaths of their parents and another sibling. While there is little documentary evidence about Caillebotte's romantic life, his bachelor status and domestic arrangements have led to varied speculation by later scholars. Psychologically, Caillebotte appeared to straddle a line between detachment and engagement. He was deeply involved in the world of art, not just as a painter, but as a facilitator of artistic progress. Yet, his personal correspondence and the tone of his paintings suggest a man of measured temperament, introspective and possibly melancholic. His realism, far from being mere documentation, often carries a subtle emotional resonance that hints at a complex inner life. While often grouped with the Impressionists, Caillebotte did not share all of their stylistic tendencies. His paintings exhibit a clarity and structure more reminiscent of photographic realism or even academic traditions. At the same time, his choice of modern subjects, innovative compositions, and experiments with perspective marked him as a forward-thinking artist. Caillebotte's approach to composition in particular reveals an analytical mindset. His use of unusual vantage points, cropped figures, and linear perspective suggests a fascination with photography and architectural drawing. These elements placed his work in a unique position between the visual immediacy of Impressionism and the intellectual discipline of academic art. By the late 1870s and early 1880s, Caillebotte's participation in exhibitions became less frequent, though he continued to paint. His interest in engineering and design also deepened during this period, especially in connection with his lifelong passion for boating. As Gustave Caillebotte moved into the later stages of his life, his focus began to shift from the Parisian art world toward a quieter, more personal realm of activity. While painting remained an important part of his daily life, he gradually turned his attention to private pursuits, particularly gardening, architecture, and his enduring passion for sailing. At the same time, the artist's role as a patron and preserver of Impressionism continued to influence the movement's trajectory, even after he withdrew somewhat from public exhibitions. Though he died relatively young and left behind a modest oeuvre, his posthumous influence would grow immensely, thanks in part to a remarkable act of generosity that ensured the preservation of France's modern artistic heritage. By the early 1880s, Caillebotte's participation in the Impressionist exhibitions began to wane. While he still maintained close personal and professional ties with many of the artists in the group, he increasingly retreated from the public sphere of art making. His absence from the final Impressionist exhibition in 1886 marked the end of his involvement with group shows. This withdrawal was not due to a rejection of his peers or a disillusionment with their artistic goals, but rather a growing sense of personal contentment with his own creative practice and private life. Caillebotte purchased a property in the small town of Petit-Gennevilliers along the Seine River, not far from Argenteuil. The estate offered him the seclusion he sought, as well as access to the river for boating. There, he designed and built a house that reflected his engineering sensibilities, incorporating modern conveniences and personal flourishes. He also cultivated elaborate gardens on the property, which would become a central inspiration for his later work. Caillebotte's interest in horticulture, like his art, was pursued with rigor and precision. Despite his physical distance from the Parisian art scene, Caillebotte never ceased painting. He continued to produce works that reflected his analytical mind and observational skill, though these later pieces received little attention during his lifetime. He exhibited sparingly and seemed content to focus on personal satisfaction rather than public acclaim. Sailing and naval engineering became increasingly prominent in Caillebotte's life during the 1880s and 1890s. A lifelong enthusiast of boats and marine design, he applied his knowledge and creativity to yacht construction and racing. He joined the Cercle de la Voile de Paris, Paris Sailing Club, and became one of its most active and prominent members. Caillebotte's involvement in yachting extended far beyond leisurely pursuits. He designed and built several racing yachts, some of which were ahead of their time in terms of engineering and speed. He participated in numerous regattas and contributed to the technical discourse surrounding naval architecture. His expertise in this area was widely respected, and he was considered one of the leading figures in French sailing circles by the end of the 19th century. Boating offered him not only a recreational outlet, but also a metaphorical space, a world governed by precision, balance, and strategy. These themes mirrored the underlying structure and order he sought in his paintings and personal life. Caillebotte's greatest legacy, however, was not in painting or yachting, but in collecting. By the time of his death, he had assembled one of the most comprehensive collections of Impressionist art in private hands. His patronage was not motivated by investment or fashion. It was a deliberate effort to support friends and ensure the survival of a movement he believed in deeply. In his will, Caillebotte made a remarkable gesture. He bequeathed his collection of over 60 Impressionist masterpieces to the French state. The donation included works by Monet, Renoir, Degas, Cézanne, Pissarro, and others. However, the terms of the bequest stipulated that the paintings must be displayed in a public museum, a condition that sparked significant controversy. At the time, the art establishment in France remained hostile to Impressionism. Many members of the official salon and cultural elite regarded these paintings as unfinished, unorthodox, and even vulgar. The French government hesitated to accept the gift, fearing that the inclusion of such works in national collections would damage the country's artistic reputation. Eventually, through the advocacy of artists like Monet and Renoir, and after negotiations between Caillebotte's heirs and the Ministry of Fine Arts, a portion of the bequest was accepted in 1896, 2 years after Caillebotte's death. Initially, 38 paintings were displayed at the Musée du Luxembourg, marking the first time that the French state officially recognized Impressionist art. Over the following decades, these works were transferred to the Louvre and eventually to the Musée d'Orsay, where they now form the cornerstone of the museum's world-renowned Impressionist collection. Gustave Caillebotte died unexpectedly on February 21, 1894, at the age of 45, from a stroke. His sudden death shocked his friends and family. Though he had not achieved the fame of some of his peers, his passing was deeply felt in the artistic community, where his generosity and intellect had left a lasting impression. In accordance with his will, Caillebotte was buried in the family vault at Père-Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. In the years that followed, his name remained associated more with his philanthropy than with his painting. Critics and scholars often viewed him as a secondary figure, an affluent amateur who happened to be involved with more famous artists. It was not until the mid-20th century that art historians began to seriously reassess Caillebotte's artistic contributions. Exhibitions dedicated to his work, as well as a growing interest in underappreciated figures of the Impressionist era, led to a revival of his reputation. Scholars began to appreciate the technical sophistication of his compositions, the modernity of his subject matter, and the psychological complexity of his vision. Today, Caillebotte is recognized as a vital figure in 19th century art, a painter who bridged the worlds of realism and Impressionism with intelligence and innovation. His work is celebrated for its clarity, structure, and emotional restraint, qualities that continue to resonate with modern audiences. In a broader sense, Caillebotte's life underscores the importance of artistic ecosystems. His financial support, logistical help, and personal encouragement enabled the survival of a movement that would transform the course of art history. While his own canvases now hang in major museums across the world, his legacy is inseparable from the broader story of Impressionism. Gustave Caillebotte remains a unique figure in the canon of art history, not only because of what he painted, but also because of what he made possible for others to create.